Imagine waking up tomorrow and discovering that an entire country just vanished from history. Not destroyed, not conquered, but simply never existed at all. Today we're erasing Malaysia from the map of time itself, and what happens next will completely reshape the world as you know it. The consequences are so massive that by the end of this video, you'll realize Malaysia's existence has touched your life in ways you never imagined possible. Let's start with something that affects you right now, at this very moment. Pull out your phone. Look at it. There's a very high chance that some of the components inside that device you're holding were manufactured in Malaysia. Now imagine those factories never existed. But here's where it gets interesting, because we're not just talking about one factory or one company. Malaysia is the 7th largest exporter of semiconductors in the entire world. These aren't just any computer chips, we're talking about the testing and packaging facilities that finalize the production of semiconductors before they reach your devices. Without Malaysia, the global semiconductor supply chain would have a gaping hole that would take decades to fill, if it could be filled at all. Apple, Intel, AMD, and dozens of other tech giants rely on Malaysian facilities. So without Malaysia existing, your smartphone would either cost twice as much, or more likely, the smartphone revolution would have happened 10 to 15 years later than it did. Think about that. No widespread smartphones until the 2020s. No Instagram in 2010. No YouTube mobile app taking over the world in the early 2010s. The entire trajectory of human communication and social media would be completely different. But wait, because the tech disruption is just the beginning, and what comes next affects something even more fundamental to modern life. Every single day, massive container ships loaded with goods travel through a narrow strip of water between Malaysia and Indonesia. This is the Strait of Malacca, and it's one of the most important maritime choke points on planet Earth. Roughly 40% of global trade passes through this strait. That's not 40% of Asian trade, that's 40% of everything traded by ship worldwide. Oil from the Middle East heading to China, manufactured goods from China heading to Europe, raw materials from Africa heading to Asia, they all funnel through this crucial waterway. Now here's the fascinating part. If Malaysia never existed, the entire northern coast of this strait vanishes. The geography itself would be radically different. The Strait of Malacca would either be much wider and less protected, making it more dangerous for shipping, or it might not exist in the configuration we know at all. Ships might have to take routes that are thousands of miles longer, adding weeks to journey times and billions of dollars to shipping costs. Remember, before the Strait of Malacca became the safe, heavily patrolled corridor it is today, this region was one of the most dangerous waters for piracy in the world. Malaysian naval forces and Coast Guard operations are a huge part of what makes this strait safe for global commerce. Without Malaysia keeping these waters secure, you're looking at either a complete rerouting of global shipping lanes or a return to the dangerous, piracy-ridden waters of centuries past. But the economic implications go even deeper than you'd think, because Malaysia sits on something that the entire world desperately needs. Palm oil. Now, before you think this is just about cooking oil, let me stop you right there. Palm oil is in everything. And I mean everything. It's in your chocolate, your shampoo, your lipstick, your bread, your ice cream, your instant noodles, your pizza dough, your soap, and even your biofuel. Studies suggest that palm oil is in roughly 50% of all packaged products in your supermarket. Malaysia is the 2nd largest producer of palm oil in the world, responsible for about 26% of global production. Without Malaysia, you're removing more than a quarter of the world's palm oil supply from history itself. The immediate impact would be catastrophic for global food prices. Palm oil is the most efficient oil crop on the planet. It produces up to 9 times more oil per hectare than soybeans. Without Malaysian palm oil production, other countries would need to dedicate absolutely massive amounts of land to produce alternative oils. We're talking about potentially clearing an area larger than the entire country of Germany just to make up for the lost Malaysian palm oil production. The environmental impact would actually be worse, not better, despite what critics of palm oil might think. And food prices? They would skyrocket. Chocolate would become a luxury item again. Processed foods would cost dramatically more. Millions of people in developing countries who rely on affordable palm oil for cooking would face serious food security issues. But let's zoom out even further, because Malaysia's absence would create ripples in one of the most important economic relationships of the modern era. Malaysia was one of the original Asian tiger economies, those rapidly developing nations that proved economic development wasn't just a Western phenomenon. In the 1980s and 1990s, Malaysia's economic success story became a model for developing nations across Asia and Africa. The country went from being primarily agricultural to becoming a major industrial and technological hub in just a few decades. Without Malaysia's example, the entire blueprint for rapid economic development in Southeast Asia would be different. Singapore's rise as a global financial hub was partly enabled by its relationship with Malaysia. The two countries separated in 1965, but they remain deeply interconnected. Singapore imports roughly 40% of its food from Malaysia and relies on Malaysia for fresh water through agreements that date back decades. Without Malaysia, Singapore's development would have been severely constrained. It might have remained a small port city rather than becoming the gleaming metropolis and financial powerhouse it is today. And if Singapore's rise was delayed or diminished, the entire financial architecture of Southeast Asia would look completely different. Hong Kong might have become even more dominant, or perhaps other cities like Bangkok or Jakarta would have filled the gap. Now let's talk about something that changed the entire landscape of international business and air travel. Malaysia Airlines. But more importantly, Air Asia. You might not realize this, but Air Asia, founded by a Malaysian entrepreneur, basically invented the low-cost carrier model for Asia. Before Air Asia, flying was expensive and inaccessible to most people in Southeast Asia. Air Asia changed everything, democratizing air travel and forcing other airlines across the continent to adapt or die. Without Malaysia, this aviation revolution might never have happened, or it might have happened years or even decades later. Millions of people who can now afford to fly for work or tourism would still be taking buses or trains on journeys that take days instead of hours. But here's where the story takes an unexpected turn into something most people never think about. Rubber. Malaysia was once the world's largest producer of natural rubber, and although it's not number one anymore, its historical role in the rubber industry shaped the modern world. The pneumatic tire, the product that made cars practical and comfortable, relied heavily on Malaysian rubber. The entire automotive revolution of the early 20th century was built partly on rubber extracted from Malaysian plantations. Without Malaysia, the development of the automobile industry would have faced serious supply constraints. Cars might have remained luxury items for longer, and the suburban sprawl that defines American and European cities might have developed differently or more slowly. Natural rubber is still crucial today, especially for aircraft tires, heavy machinery, and medical equipment. Synthetic rubber can't completely replace natural rubber for these applications. Malaysian rubber expertise and production capacity have been essential for maintaining global supply chains. Remove Malaysia from history, and you're creating bottlenecks in industries from aviation to healthcare. Let's shift gears to something that hits even closer to home for millions of people. Badminton. Malaysia is one of the global powerhouses in this sport, and Malaysian players have inspired generations of athletes across Asia. Without Malaysia's presence in international badminton, the sport's development in Southeast Asia would be completely different. Chinese dominance might be even more overwhelming, potentially making the sport less competitive and less interesting globally. But sports influence culture, and culture influences society. The absence of Malaysian sporting success would remove role models and sources of national pride that have shaped the region's social development. And speaking of culture, let's talk about something that's transforming entertainment worldwide. Malaysian cinema and television, while not as globally dominant as South Korean or Japanese content, has had a significant influence on Southeast Asian pop culture. Malaysian actors, directors, and productions have helped shape the entertainment landscape across the region. Without Malaysia, the entire tapestry of Southeast Asian creative expression would have different patterns, different colors, different stories being told. But we need to address the elephant in the room, something that makes Malaysia's hypothetical absence even more complex and far-reaching. Religion and politics. Malaysia is one of the few Muslim-majority countries that has successfully balanced modernization, economic development, and religious identity. It's not perfect, no country is, but Malaysia's model of development has been studied by other Muslim-majority nations trying to navigate the same challenges. Without Malaysia's example, the entire discourse about Islam and modernity, about religious identity and economic progress, would lack an important reference point. Countries from the Middle East to Africa have looked at Malaysia's trajectory when planning their own development strategies. Malaysia's foreign policy has also played a crucial balancing role in Southeast Asia. The country has maintained relationships with both China and the United States, with both the Islamic world and the West. This diplomatic balancing act has helped keep Southeast Asia from becoming too polarized during various global tensions. Without Malaysia, the geopolitical landscape of Southeast Asia would be significantly different. Thailand and Indonesia would have to carry more weight in regional diplomacy, and the balance of power might tilt more heavily toward one major power or another. Now let's talk about something that affects global health in ways most people never consider. Tropical medicine and infectious disease research. Malaysia's location in the heart of the tropics makes it a crucial site for studying diseases like dengue fever, malaria, and emerging infectious diseases that can jump from animals to humans. Malaysian research institutions have contributed significantly to our understanding of tropical diseases and to the development of treatments. Without this research hub, our global preparedness for disease outbreaks would be diminished. Think about that for a second. During the next pandemic, whenever that might be, we might be missing crucial research and expertise that could save millions of lives. Malaysia is also home to some of the oldest rainforests on Earth, older than the Amazon. These forests contain plant and animal species found nowhere else on the planet. Pharmaceutical companies and researchers have discovered numerous compounds with medical potential in these rainforests. Without Malaysia, these discoveries never happen. Medications that might have cured diseases or alleviated suffering simply never get developed because the source material never becomes accessible to science. The biodiversity impact goes even further. Malaysia sits in the Coral Triangle, the global center of marine biodiversity. The waters around Malaysia contain more species of fish and coral than anywhere else on Earth. Malaysian marine conservation efforts help protect this incredible ecosystem. Without Malaysia, the entire conservation framework for the Coral Triangle would be different, potentially weaker. We could be looking at accelerated extinction rates for marine species that play crucial roles in ocean ecosystems worldwide. Here's something that might surprise you. Education. Malaysia has become a significant destination for international students, particularly from other parts of Asia, the Middle East, and Africa. Malaysian universities offer education that's more affordable than Western institutions but still maintains good quality. Thousands of students who study in Malaysia each year would instead have to find alternatives, potentially limiting their educational opportunities entirely if they can't afford more expensive options elsewhere. The global pool of educated professionals would be smaller, and many individuals who climbed out of poverty through Malaysian education would never get that chance. Let's connect some of these threads in a way that shows just how interconnected everything really is. A student from Indonesia goes to university in Malaysia, studies engineering, and gets recruited by a tech company with operations in Penang. That engineer contributes to developing components that end up in smartphones worldwide. Those smartphones enable a new wave of social media apps. Those apps change how people communicate, how movements organize, how information spreads. Remove Malaysia, and you've potentially changed the life trajectory of that one engineer, which changes the product development timeline at that company, which affects when certain technologies reach the market, which influences how quickly society adopts new communication methods. One removed country creates endless ripple effects through millions of individual lives and choices. Think about the strategic resources we haven't even fully discussed yet. Malaysia has significant deposits of tin, and it was once the world's largest producer. Tin is essential for soldering electronics. Without Malaysian tin production, the entire electronics manufacturing boom of the late 20th century would have faced serious constraints. Prices would have been higher, production would have been slower, and the digital revolution might have taken significantly longer to reach the masses. Liquefied natural gas is another big one. Malaysia is one of the world's major LNG exporters. Countries across Asia rely on Malaysian gas to keep their lights on and their industries running. Without Malaysia, these countries would need to find alternative energy sources, likely meaning increased coal use with all the environmental consequences that brings, or slower industrial development as they struggle to secure adequate energy supplies. But let's think about the human element in all of this, because that's what really matters at the end of the day. Malaysia has a population of over 33 million people. These aren't just statistics, these are doctors, engineers, artists, teachers, farmers, entrepreneurs, parents, children. Every one of them has contributed something to the world, even if it's just the ripple effect of their daily choices and interactions. Without Malaysia existing, you're removing 33 million people's worth of human potential from history. The discoveries not made, the businesses not started, the art not created, the children not taught, the patients not healed. One of those 33 million people might have been the person who inspires the scientist who cures cancer in 2040. One of them might have been the teacher who inspires a student who becomes a world leader who prevents a war. One of them might have been the engineer whose incremental improvement to semiconductor manufacturing enables the next great technological breakthrough. When you remove an entire country from existence, you're not just changing trade routes and product prices, you're removing countless threads from the tapestry of human progress, and you can never fully predict which threads were holding together something crucial. The world without Malaysia would be poorer in every sense of the word. Economically poorer, because of lost production and increased costs across countless industries. Culturally poorer, because of missing perspectives and creative expressions. Scientifically poorer, because of research never conducted and discoveries never made. And morally poorer, because we would be missing an example of a diverse, multi-ethnic, multi-religious society that, despite its imperfections, has managed to build something functional and prosperous. So the next time you use your smartphone, eat chocolate, or book a cheap flight across Asia, take a moment to appreciate the intricate web of global interdependence that makes your modern life possible. Malaysia might seem like just another country on a map, but as we've seen, its existence has shaped technology, trade, culture, science, and countless individual lives in ways that ripple across the entire planet. The world with Malaysia is fundamentally different from a world without it, and now you know exactly why that matters.